Hey everyone, Aaron here from MTGChallengers, and welcome to another Magic the Gathering deck tech. Today I'd like to show off our Abzan graveyard deck for Khans of Tarkir Standard. My favorite color alignment is white, black, and green. I've always felt that it has really the best balance of removal, creatures, and interactions, and this deck definitely displays that. Basically, the goal here is to load up your graveyard with large, expensive creatures and use Whip of Erebos to recur them and return them to the battlefield and get a lot of advantage off of them. I've always loved graveyard decks, and this is one of my favorite ones ever. So let's get started by going over the creature base. First off, I have a playset of Elvish Mystic. It's just a great turn 1 play, gets you ahead of or on tempo with your opponent, even on the draw. It lets you get Nyx Weaver out there on turn 2, and Siege Rhino out there on turn 3, which is always awesome. And it just generally accelerates you along to cast your bigger and better spells. In similar function, I have 4 Sylvan Caryatid. Comes down a turn later, but the mid-range utility of this card is just unmatched in Standard right now. One of any color can be really important in a 3-color deck like this. It can't be removed nearly as easily as the Mystic with the Hexproof, and 3 toughness is a nice number to be able to hold all the 2-power aggressive creatures at bay while you ramp up into your bigger creatures. It's great against any kind of red aggressive decks, playing things like Mystic Monastery, and up against the other green decks, it blocks Courser of Kruphix all day, which is really nice. A playset of Satyr Wayfinder gets us started on the graveyard elements of the deck. So for 2 mana, it digs 4 cards into the deck, and you can get a land. Overall, a really solid card. Commune with the Gods is normally preferable since it gets you 5 cards in, and you can grab the whip with it with the enchantment ability, but you also do get a body with the Wayfinder, like a chump blocker or something, so again, it's pretty solid. Next, I have 3 copies of Nyx Weaver. Again, another way to get creature cards into your graveyard to be able to reanimate them. It's also great with Murderous Cut, since it gives you fuel for the Delve ability, and if you do mill one of them, it allows for you to get it back. The same thing goes for something like Whip of Erebos, a card that you definitely don't want to be in your graveyard. Like the Caryatid, the 3 toughness is a good number, will usually block any aggressive creatures, and the reach can be handy up against things like Hornet Queen or Stormbreath Dragon, where you fend off a big flyer for a turn and exile it after the block to get maximum value out of it. So now we start to get into the big creatures that we're looking to use the whip on. Siege Rhino is just an amazing mid-range card, so it was definitely a 4 of. The important thing to remember when using Whip of Erebos to reanimate creatures is that the creature has to do something other than just attack in, since they do get exiled at the end of the turn, and the Gain 3, Drain 3 effect is great for that. As far as the power level goes, it's in a pretty great spot where you can easily hardcast it and get it out really early with the mana guys, and he's also substantial enough to be able to reanimate him to great effect. Next, I have 3 Hornet Queen, really the centerpiece of the creature base as far as a value reanimation target goes. The important thing to note here is that, of course, you'll lose the queen herself. Again, the creatures get exiled at the end of the turn, but even when she gets exiled, you're still left with those 4/4 Death Touch flyers, which can block anything no matter what the size, or just fly over unblocked for 20% of a starting life total each turn. And when it goes into the late game, you can hardcast the queen, then when she dies, you can whip her back and get 4 more. Really just a powerhouse of a card. Having all that power split among 5 bodies is really great against any kind of spot removal, like Hero's Downfall, Banishing Light, or Lightning Strike. They do still technically work, of course, but it just makes them so much more inefficient. 2 Ashen Rider rounds things out really nicely. Another just monster card with Whip of Erebos. Exile target permanent is just such a liberating effect. You can, get a land, an enchantment, a planeswalker, creature, and pretty much nothing other than hexproof is going to stop you. It's also a 5-powered creature in the air, which is never a bad thing. If it's in the late game and you hardcast it, all the better, since you'll usually get 2 triggers out of the effect. So that's it for the creatures. Let's take a look at some of the other spells. I have a playset of Commune with the Gods. The ideal mill spell for this deck gets you 5 cards in for just 2 mana. It does not grab a land, unfortunately, but it can get you a mana dork or something basically equivalent to it. The main advantage here comes with the ability to get an enchantment into your hand. It's just a huge amount of value to mill some great creatures into your graveyard and get Whip of Erebos into your hand with 1 spell. And it also can grab something like Banishing Light, game 2 or 3, which can be very good. Murderous Cut is great as a 3 of. It's pretty much the perfect removal spell for this deck. Destroy target creature at instant speed is always very powerful, and we'll almost always be casting it for practically nothing, usually for 1 or 2. We just have so many ways to get cards into the grave with this deck, and this card allows us to capitalize on all the lands, spells, stuff that we definitely won't be reanimating, and it's almost never a bad thing when we draw this card. Next, I have 2 copies of See the Unwritten, an alternate way we have of reanimating things in this deck. Milling 8 cards is pretty significant, and it's usually enough to get something worthwhile out of it. Either you get a fatty or 2 onto the field, in which case the game is usually over, or you get 8 irrelevant cards closer to drawing or milling something that you need. It works especially well with Siege Rhino, since it does have 5 power, so if you have a Siege Rhino on the field, which in the mid to late game is pretty common, you have a chance of getting 2 huge creatures onto the battlefield, which again is very, very difficult for your opponent to deal with. And finally, we have 3 Whip of Erebos, the cornerstone of the deck. Just an extremely powerful card in any mid-range deck, and especially in a graveyard-based one like this. Giving all your creatures lifelink is really tremendous against any kind of aggressive decks, particularly Jeskai Burn and Blue-White Heroic. You can gain 5 life per swing if you have a Siege Rhino out, and it lets you benefit from blocks that normally aren't very good. But the main value for this deck, of course, is the ability. For 4 mana, you can return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, it gains haste, so you can immediately swing in, and it gets exiled at the end of the turn. Again, that's why we're playing cards like Siege Rhino and Hornet Queen, cards that give you value beyond just being able to attack. The Rhino gets exiled, but you still gain 3 and drain them 3. The Queen gets exiled, but you're still left with 4 Death Touch flyers. Just the centerpiece of the deck, and one of my favorite cards in Standard at the moment. So that's it for the spells. Let's take a look at the mana base. Running a total of 24 lands, 3 of which are Windswept Heath. Fetch lands are always awesome. It's 3 more opportunities to get turn 1 green for an Elvish Mystic or something. It also helps out Murderous Cut a little bit, since of course you're going to be sacrificing it, so that's 1 more card in the grave that you can exile to help with the delve. For Pain lands, I have a playset of Llanowar Wastes. This deck is very much green and black centered. White is really more of a splash here, so 4 of these do really well as the Pain lands. Gives you tempo when you need it and generic mana when you don't, which is why I love them so much. Then I have 6 Scry lands, 4 Temple of Malady and 2 Temple of Plenty. Always nice to scry, and this deck is no exception, especially if you play it before things like Commune with the Gods or Satyr Wayfinder to peek at the top card. If it's something that won't be valuable to mill, you just bottom it, so you increase your chances of hitting something you need. Sandsteppe Citadel is great to have as a playset. Just a general mana fixer, entering tap doesn't hurt a mid-range deck that much at all. Then I have 1 Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. A nice one-of land, gives you absolute fixing for one of the deck's primary colors, and it itself can tap for black mana, of course, and it enters untapped, so it's a really nice complement to this mana base. And then I have 6 basics, which break down evenly, 2 forests, 2 swamps, and 2 plains. So that's what we have for the main board. Let's take a look at the sideboard. Starting things off, I have 3 Nyx-Fleece Ram. It's a great anti-aggressive card. A stable life game can really help you outlast them. It helps them run out of steam with their burn spells, while you stabilize them and kill them with your larger creatures. And the 5 toughness also makes it an excellent blocker against pretty much everything they'll be playing. It's also great for racing against other green mid-range decks playing Courser of Krufix. They will get the card advantage still, but it definitely doesn't hurt to be able to stay with them in terms of life gain. 1 Resolute Archangel is really great tech against Jeskai Burn. You drop it late game when your life total is dwindling, and you basically restart the game, except you're at a huge advantage. By that time, most of their steam in their hand has run out, they've used most of their burn spells, and now you have 4 power in the air that can profitably block their Manus Riders. Then I have a 4th Hornet Queen, mainly just sided up against the green mid-range decks that are running 3 or 4 of them main board. Just helps to be able to fight fire with fire in those cases. Next, I have 3 copies of Thoughtseize. It's not quite as good as it was in the last standard format, but it's still great disruption against any kind of combo decks, or decks that rely on specific interactions rather than just general mid-range or control strategies. 2 Heroes Downfall is really useful up against certain mid-range decks running a lot of Planeswalkers, particularly against Red-Green or Timur with their Xenagos the Revelers, Sarkons, and sometimes Nisas. Also can be good against Abzan mid-range to kill their Garriks if they're playing any. Next, I have 3 Banishing Light. A great all-purpose removal spell to get rid of just about any problem you may be experiencing, a creature, a planeswalker, an enchantment, anything that the Murderous Cut or Hero's Downfall won't deal with. Great use of the white in the deck. And rounding things out, I have 2 Elspeth, Sun's Champion. Awesome all-purpose planeswalker, she protects herself really well with the +1, pumps out a ton of blockers to get her loyalty up there and then fly over with them for the win. And her -3 is a great way to get rid of things like Polykranos, Stormbreath Dragon, and pretty much anything else in the mid-range or monsters matchups. So that's it for this deck tech. Be sure to check out our others. To see these decks in action, check out our gameplay videos. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like the Facebook page and consider making a donation to support the continuation of this project. Thanks for watching, and as always, subscribe for more Magic the Gathering content.